Good afternoon, Europe. Good morning, America. Good evening, Korea. And good morning to that part of Russia where it is just past midnight. We have a 14-hour range of difference between our speakers today. My name is David Fraser-Harris. I'm the Secretary General for UPF in the Middle East, and I will be your moderator for this session. Welcome to our sixth session of the July ILC 2021 here in Europe and the Middle East. As you know, the overall theme of our series is toward peace on the Korean Peninsula. This session, which will focus on the arts, is entitled Talking to the Heart, Culture as Peacemaker. I will begin with two technical announcements. First, there will be Russian translation during this program. If you want to hear our speakers in your language, you will need to click Your Language on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. Second, we hope to have time to answer some of your questions towards the end of the program. Please use the Q&A, which you see there on the screen, to submit your questions. Did you read our backgrounder? Perhaps you recognize the words of UPF's co-founder, Dr. Hak-Jahan Moon. Here they are again. People often think that politics moves the world, but that is not the case. It is culture and art that move the world. It is affection, not reason, that touches people in their innermost being. So today, we hope we can do more than talk. We hope to give you a taste of just how it is that culture opens the way to peace. Is your heart ready? We have four very special panelists for you today. Dr. David Eaton, an American composer and conductor who lives in Korea. Dr. Seung-ho Lee, the Korean president of the DMZ Forum, who lives in America. Mrs. Natalya Karpova, deputy of the Municipal District of Khasan, the part of Russia which borders on North Korea, and Dr. No-hee Park, who is the senior representative of UPF in Korea. Finally, before we move to your questions, before we move to your questions at the end, we have a very special video for you, but more about that later. Now to our first speaker. Dr. David Eaton has been the music director of the New York City Symphony since 1985. He has appeared as a guest conductor with orchestras all over the world and is also a prolific composer, arranger, and producer. He currently serves as the co-director of music at the Hyojeong Cultural Foundation. But just before we have him speak, we want to show you a short video of Dr. Eaton in action. So let's watch that video now.
Oh
We are so happy to have Dr. Eaton with us today. Please join me from behind your screens in welcoming our first speaker, Dr. David Eaton. Dr. Eaton, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and it's great to be here and to share with you once again. This is our second International Artists Association for Culture and Peace gathering. And I wanted to thank the organizers for showing that brief music clip, because that was one of the projects that I think exemplifies the power of art and music to assist in the process of creating a culture of peace. And I will share a bit more about that in a moment. I'm going to go to a screen share here, if I may, and to share a few photos with you. Okay, I hope that's up for everybody. And Dr. Fraser mentioned this quote by our co-founder, Dr. Khasan Moon, about the power of music and art and culture to bring change. And in the concept of music for peace, of course, this is not a new concept. This goes back thousands of years. And the Platonic ideal of beauty, truth, and goodness. There's the beauty aspect, which deals with aesthetics, of course. There's the truth aspect, which deals with technique or craft or intellect or how art is made. But there's also the goodness aspect, which deals with values and morals, what we call in philosophical terms axiology. And that's an important aspect of the art world, that artists don't create in a vacuum. What we place before the public has consequences. Therefore, there's a certain moral obligation on the part of artists to create art that hopefully, ideally, will contribute to developing a better individuals and by extension, a better society. And I came across some interesting observations by ancient Chinese composers. Many of us know about the Greeks, the Socrates or Aristotle, Plato, who wrote quite a bit about music, but also the ancient Chinese philosophers had quite a few things to say on this subject. And Lu Buwei, who was a politician, who was roughly a contemporary of Confucius, made this comment. He said, the will of people living in an area can be known by examining the customs prevailing there, and their virtues can be known by examining their will, whether a state will become prosperous or face its downfall, whether its leaders are sensible or unworthy, and whether a person is honorable or corrupt can all be known by the music they enjoy. That's a very revealing comment. It points to the power of music to be able to shape attitudes, both individually and societally. We're going to hear from Dr. Nohipak a little bit later about the Little Angels. But back in 1962, our founders established the Little Angels with the intent of them becoming a world-class ensemble to go to the world as ambassadors of peace, cultural ambassadors, and to open the hearts of people so they could receive new truth. And of course, they've become a world-class ensemble. They have literally traveled the world. And we're going to hear a bit more about their work especially in regards to North-South Korea unity. We're going to be hearing a bit more about that later from Dr. Nohipak. But I wanted to go back to the music we heard at the outset. Between 2003 and 2011, I was able to travel to Israel about 12 times to produce events for the Middle East Peace Initiative, and including the Heart-to-Heart rally that took place in Jerusalem in December of 2003. This was a very difficult time in Israel. The second Intifada was taking place. There were acts of terror going on all over Israel. Yet we had this successful rally in which music played a big part of bringing people together under the motto of peace, shalom, salam aleikum. This was an attempt to bring together the leaders of the three Abrahamic faiths who for so long had been living in certain modes of conflict. So this event was an event to try to bring about harmony and peace, and using music as a way. We produced a CD of music that was written by many of the participants who were in that concert, plus others. And at that time, we met the Israeli singer David Dor, who you saw in the video. And David is a major artist in Israel who's performed for popes and President Clinton, President Obama. And together we wrote music and produced a CD using the theme Peace, Shalom, Salam Aleikum as the lyrics in many of the tunes that we wrote together. And we also performed this music in Europe several times, in Taiwan. We went to Taiwan to do peace concerts. This was 2013. We've done this music at the United Nations. So we were at the United Nations in 2015 doing a concert in which we featured some of the music that we had co-composed together, all in the spirit again of using art and culture as a way to bring harmony. And this particular concert at the UN, the title of the concert was The Transformative Power of the Arts. And we had great success there. We met His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, who was very appreciative of our efforts, and Seung-ho Lee, who you saw briefly in the musical clip, and you see here in the photo. Many people don't know this, but Seung-ho went to North Korea 5 times in the early 2000s to do concerts. And it was through her art and using her ability that she was able to open the doors to people. And for a Japanese woman to go to North Korea at that time to do concerts was very significant. We've also produced music by other composers through the Peace Music Foundation. We've had several songwriting contests. And I've done a number of benefit concerts for young artists in New York, for the Harlem's Boys Choir and the Harlem School of the Arts, where we've been working to educate and develop young talent in the city, all in the spirit, again, of using art and culture and beauty to bring interfaith, interreligious, intercultural, interracial harmony. So for us, it's not just a matter of talking about the art, but it's really a matter of producing art and culture in ways that can hopefully bring change and affect people in a positive way. As I said before, artists don't create in a vacuum. What we create has power. How we use that power is very important. So the goodness aspect of the truth, beauty, and goodness paradigm is very important to consider for artists. And I encourage all artists to look at their art from that perspective. And also, I'd like to make a pitch. I always want to make a pitch that, again, we don't want to just talk about art. We want to do it. We want to produce it. We want to create it. So it's always important to have producers and patrons who are willing to help us in this endeavor. So this is just some brief testimonies about what we have done, what we've accomplished. And we're still working with David Dor. I'm still working with Seung-ho Lee and all these artists. We're still trying to use our art, our ability, our talent to promote the ideals of peace. And so I think this aspect of UPF, the IAACP, is very important. And I look forward to more give and take with various artists around the world to see how we can continue to promote the ideals of the founders, and especially universally shared values, and defining those values, and then creating art, culture, business, education, all in the spirit of living for the higher purpose. So too often we get into a left-right paradigm, but it's really more a higher, lower paradigm that we should be dealing with. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you, David, Fraser, and all the organizers for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eaton. It's really wonderful to see. And of course, I know a lot of what you've been doing, but it's very nice to see it laid out there. I have a question that I'd like to ask you, and it came to me while I was preparing for this webinar and doing some research. You probably saw the same images I did probably 30 years ago of the cellist of Sarajevo. And I think a film was made of it. And it was, as an English teacher in the Middle East, I found myself teaching about it. This was such a moving situation where there had been an explosion in a bakery killing about 20 people in Bosnia. And the next day he had gone and played for the following 22 days, one day for every person who had died. And people asked him, aren't you crazy playing in the middle of a war? And his response was, aren't they crazy firing weapons? I wondered if you had a comment on this in terms of the relationship between culture and peace.
That your story reminded me of a situation during the Vietnamese War, the Vietnam War. In my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, the Cleveland Orchestra went on strike for a while, and outside the concert hall, they had picket signs, and one of the picket signs read, "Brahms, not bombs." Okay, it's promoting the idea that there are better ways, and that war is a result, or conflict is a result of moving away from love. We should always be striving for how to find ways to love each other. When that doesn't happen, often we turn to justice, okay? But that's a step down. And when justice fails, we turn to power. And when power fails, we turn to war. So we should always be striving for the higher ideal. And our founders talked about true love, not true justice. That's not to say that justice isn't important, but to do art and culture in the spirit of love, of true love, and again, living for the sake of others. This is the way. And I think the cellist you mentioned and the musicians in Cleveland at that time, when they said Brahms is the way, not bombs, it's a certain idealism. But if we lose that idealism, we devolve in ways that are very unproductive and destructive.
Thank you. I like that. We have to raise the level. And as you said when you were speaking, it's between upper and lower, not left and right.
I think so. I think so.
Raise the discourse. Well, you have. Thank you very much, Dr. Eaton, for your words. Our second speaker is the president of the DMZ Forum, which aims to preserve the globally unique biological and cultural resources of the Korean DMZ, Demilitarized Zone. Before he speaks in a minute, we're going to show a video. He wants to preserve this area as a sanctuary for peace and nature. But this is not just an idea. Dr. Lee has conducted joint on-site research on such rare species as tigers, leopards, Asiatic black bears, red-crowned cranes, and white-naped cranes in and near the DMZ. He has helped plant thousands of tree saplings on many North Korean hills and mountains. Now, we would like to see a brief video now before he speaks, introducing Dr. Lee. Dr. Lee, Dr. Seung-ho Lee, we are all ears.
Thank
Please
you.
tell us
Thank you,
how you
David.
plan to realize this great vision.
All right. Thank you, David, for this great introduction. I'm very honored to be invited to this ILC webinar. So to save time, I directly go to my PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so today's my talk is using Aesop's fable, Aesop's wisdom, that who can take up the traveler's cloak or clothes. And as my focus of the first part of the talk is how North Koreans are culturally different. So there were obviously no North Koreans before 1945. Korea was divided kind of mysteriously at the end of the World War II. Maybe it is a divine division. I live in Long Island. I was born in South Korea. Maybe I just thought about the American military's ignorance of Korea as like a Long Island. It's divided easily. So who are the North Koreans? There were no North Koreans, but most Korean people who moved to the north rather than to the south at the end of Japanese colonialism in 1945 had been extremely defiant against Japanese colonial rule by joining the military combat style in the Batangs movement, rather than diplomatic, educational, or cultural style. So some of them even joined Chinese military in China as officers and private soldiers to fight together against Japanese army in China and Manchuria. And some of them are remembered still as heroes who saved the lives of many Chinese leaders and soldiers with a battle with the Japanese army. So these Koreans moved to the north at the end of the World War II, but they came back later in 1948 to China as the official North Korean army to help the Chinese People's Revolution Army in fighting against the Kuomintang army. So here they witnessed clearly how the entire China fell into the hands of communists in 1949. So at the time, North Koreans mistakenly perceived South Koreans under US military as similar to Koreans under Japanese colonialism. So at the time, North Korea simply viewed the United States as another imperialist force replacing Japan. So under this condition of edges line, North Korea launched the Korean War on June 25, 1950. But North Korea still argues that the war had already begun by the US when it occupied a certain half of the Korean peninsula in 1945, and the North Korean response to the war in 1950 was only intended to liberate South Korean people from the US imperialism and blamed the US for all the human loss and devastation. So at the end of the war in 1953, DMZ was formed along the military demarcation line. And since 1953, North Korea has always considered Korean DMZ a symbol of US imperialism and national disgrace. So unlike United States that forgot the Korean War as a forgotten war, the North Korea still vividly remembered Korean Wars as it happened yesterday. So longer sense, historical sense, Korea here, North Korean people had been defiant, sovereign, and threatening to China for thousands of years. And so North Koreans here actually had a very deep-seated suspicions against neighboring countries, such as China and Japan and other countries, have historically invaded Korean peninsula more than 900 times. So North Koreans, culturally and historically, their descendants are innately defiant. So think about who moved to the north after the Japanese colonial rule. So Juche, Kim Il-sung was very shrewd in rallying the North Korean people under the flag of Juche, self-reliance and independence. And he was so effective in purging his political rivals. and maintaining the North Korean regime until now, despite unbearable economic hardships. Kim Il-sung knew that North Koreans who happen to be North Koreans have deep-rooted cultural sense of independence, inherited from the Gojoseon and Korea. And North Koreans have been easily persuaded by the regime's propaganda of US imperialism as an imminent foreign aggression, because the Korean War did not end formally yet. So Kim Il-sung's 주체 has been so well received by North Koreans as the everyday guidance of their life. 우리 식대로 살아나가자. Let's live out in our own way. So the regime, no matter how hard the economic hardships, will not collapse. Under this isolated conditions, it is obvious the regime will not give up its nuclear weapons for its own survival. For sure, the regime will not simply succumb to any types of maximum pressures. They are willing to fight to the death to expel any foreign aggression. This is a recent show the first female general in North Korea who vividly remembered Japanese rule in Korean War, just like it happened yesterday. So traveling ban to North Korea have been invaded by neighboring countries for more than 900 times in history. Just want to be alone without external pressure. But US, the wind here, tried to knock down the traveling man, was starving to death in the process of taking up the nuclear cloak, nuclear weapons. But the wind policy so far failed. Why? Even if the US achieves the goal of knocking down the North Korean regime, it is very likely still the fanatic sect of North Korean military could snatch and detonate the nuclear weapons or sell them to terrorist groups, as the nuclear weapons now are very small, enough to be stored in a school backpack. So why failed? The US failed to understand cultural nature of North Korean people who cherished 주체 and supported the regime. It's not just brainwashing skill of the regime. So because of a US ignorance of 주체 and North Korean people and the maximum pressure policies of the wind policy, ironically, North Korean regime has been able to survive for the last 30 years. On the other hand, the consequences. North Korean people are the most independent, industrious, loyal people in the world, not to mention smart and intelligent. They are innate freedom seekers against any types of repression, foreign aggression. So when there's no external foreign threat, sanctions, North Korean people will naturally achieve their internal freedom by their own means and power. But ironically, however, the maximum external pressures by the US have deprived North Korean people of such an opportunity and strengthened the position of 주체 ideology of North Korean regime. So the US should become the sun to empower the North Korean people, not the North Korean regime. So how to empower interaction with the local people by reforestation effort, just as DMZ Forum did in the past years, empowering North Koreans. This is reforestation in North Korea. Khasan area, a women's group, are very energetic, willing to cooperate. So another aspect, tourism. So North Koreans are not allowed to travel overseas for tourism. They even need permission to travel other towns within North Korea. So we need to give them an aspiration, but to travel abroad is a very normal lifestyle. This is Pyongyang International Airport. Departure, only 2 international destinations, Vladivostok and Beijing. This is Samchali minivan made by Dongye Groups, Peace Motors, made in North Korea. But the road condition is very bad. This is sort of interstate highway from Pyongyang to Wonsan, very rough and bumpy, but still this is the sort of best part. So after 3 hours of travel, we arrived at Mashingnyang ski resort and hotel that are very, very fancy. And the food is fine, but I thought that North Koreans should taste better hamburgers. And we arrived at the eastern coast, Wonsan Beach, that I took photos. I heard that there's a Seung-ho one, that was a potential mass wedding site in 1991 when Reverend Moon was visited North Korea and talked with President Kim Il-sung about this blessing ceremony, but that didn't happen because of South Korean objection. This area is also for international research. Another agricultural sunlight. Here's the Ambyan plain from Wonsan to Ambyan here. So we supported local farmers to produce more rice crops by providing tractors and farm equipment and offering farming skills. And then in return, we request they leave some crops for birds, the cranes, after harvesting. So that's how the cranes from Choron in the winter from DMZ migrate here to get some food. And then we moved to Khasan here. This is huge apple farm in Khasan. And then we moved to Sepodongpan plain. This is a huge 50,000 hectares of grassy mountains. Remember that the current president Kim Jong-un was educated in Switzerland during his middle and high school era, and he enjoyed basketball and skiing. He probably thinking about alpine meadows in Switzerland, dreaming to turn it into like this. Also, more profitable fruit trees in Sepodongpan and a huge scale of crop fields, such as potato field. And US should be sunlight for biodiversity protection in the DMZ. And the first step could be establishing the 5th UN Secretariat in the DMZ for climate change and biodiversity protection. And we can use the DMZ to reduce carbon emissions by promoting carbon credit program, in which manufacturing firms producing pollutants could lease areas of DMZ in exchange for monetary carbon credits. Peace zone could be established, linking these two pristine mountains through the DMZ. This peace zone under UN jurisdiction could play a pivotal role in collective security and trust building. And this process, US military should be present in South Korea, because although there's no chance for North Korea to attack other neighboring countries, South Korea is an exception. Until North Korean misconception of South Korean liberation, Namjoseon Haebang, stemmed from the Juche ideology, is completely erased, and maximum military preparedness of South Korea is necessary. In this process, strong Godism within North Korea is needed to replace North Korean idea of Oboi Suryang. Oboi means parent, spring commander. And another sunlight for memorial.
I'm very sorry to interrupt you, but I think it's important for you to bring your presentation to a close. Otherwise,
Okay.
we won't have time for the other speakers.
Okay, so just 1 minute. And combining Gettysburg and Bong's Church in North Korea, I felt power of Holy Spirit. So Bong's Church is fully controlled by North Korean government, only for foreigners. But these people are fully orchestrated, but still I felt power of Holy Spirit who can control the power. The Bible, the songs of choir is exactly the same as the ones in South Korea. Although Kim Il-sung, the name Kim Il-sung was mentioned several times in the sermon. That's the only difference. So we need to interact with the North Korean church and religions, even though it is government control. We know the power of the Holy Spirit who can influence things. North Koreans. I strongly felt that. Okay, so who can take up the North Korean nuclear clock? It's the sun. So US should become the sun, not the wind, to empower North Korean people. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. There's a lot of work to do there. Thank you for all that you are doing to pioneer and help us to understand more clearly about North Korea.
Thank you.
Our third speaker, Mrs. Natalya Karpova, is a deputy of 2 convocations of the Duma of the Khasan Municipal District on the border of Russia, China, and the DPRK. And she is a teacher of mathematics. She has organized many international cultural projects, both in North Korea and in Russia, with the participation of school children and youth from North and South Korea, China, and Japan. Even though it is almost 1 a.m. in Khasan, Mrs. Karpova is with us now. However, knowing that her local internet connection may be unreliable, UPF Russia have kindly arranged to pre-record Mrs. Karpova's remarks. Remember to click on the English interpretation if you want to hear the translation. Let's watch her presentation now.
Good afternoon, dear participants of the conference. I am Natalya Karpova from the small town of Khasan, which stands on the border with North Korea, the Democratic People's Republic of Russia. And I greet you all. The main thing for a person living on a large planet named Earth is the preservation of a unique planet and the preservation of peace. After all, people suffer from diseases, from different natural man-made disasters. People who live on the border with some states always feel that they are the messengers of peace. It seems to them that peace on the whole earth depends on life on the border. So for us, living in the junction of 3 states, Russia, North Korea, and China, this mission seems to be a very important link in the preservation of peace. What is it all about? This is, first of all, knowledge of the peoples inhabiting the country, knowledge of culture, education, traditions, achievements in sports, in technical progress. That is knowledge of the countries, our neighbors. I have lived for over 40 years in the small town of Khasan. This is a legendary place which, with its own history and traditions. In 1952, a railway station was built for cooperation and trade with the Democratic People's Republic of Russia. Railroad workers worked for many years both on the Soviet side and on the Korean side as well. It was an exchange of goods for people, clothing, vegetables, fruits, fertilizers, timber, coal. But in addition to trade relations, cultural ties also developed. Meetings, cultural evenings, excursions to natural and historical monuments. And we remember the first meeting of Kim Il-sung on our land. It was the Khasan land that met the leader of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. It was an unforgettable meeting. There was a thorough preparation and meeting with the pioneers at the time. In the 80s, the Soviet Korean Friendship Society was created with the purpose to study history, to organize events, cultural evenings, evenings of Russian song, visiting cinemas, excursions to enterprises, holding ecological cleaning projects, acquaintance with the flora and fauna of our countries. Because on the territory of Khasan and neighboring Tumangan, railway workers worked. They co-exchanged. The Korean side worked for us, and the Soviet side worked in Tumangan. Of course, everybody had some free time. And for relations between nations, a lot depends on how a person spends his free time. The stories about Korean culture and Russian culture, art, literature, and music took place after the establishment of the Soviet Korean Friendship Society. Good traditions were established. At these meetings, we exchanged various information about our traditions. Our meetings were held in the House of Friendship, which was built especially for the meeting of Kim Il-sung. In addition, trips to the cinema and enterprises were organized. In this photo, we can see this. In addition, trips to the beautiful coast of the Sea of Japan were also organized. Collecting wild plants, seafood, joint recreation, exchange of dishes, recipes, and at the same time, a lot of guests came from Pyongyang. They all, of course, visited the House of Friendship, as you can see it here as well, left friendly notes in the book of honorary visitors. Usually we rest at the time of drinking tea, Russian traditions and songs. Without this, of course, it is difficult to develop relationship. On the Korean side, railway workers could visit directly cultural and natural monuments, monuments dedicated to the Victory Day in World War II. This photo is on the Soviet side in the village, in the regional center of the village, Slavyanka. Such trips took place. In addition, the railway workers of Khasan station could visit the famous Kamgansan Mountains. After the construction of the House of Friendship, after visiting it, the improvement of the territory began. And here we together as joint society, representatives of the Soviet Korean Friendship Society have planted an alley of pine trees. In the photo a little later, you can see that those pines have already grown because this alley is already more than 30 years old. In 1990, at the invitation of the head of the Korean Labor Party, Kim Jong-il, we visited the capital of North Korea, Pyongyang. It was, of course, a great honor for us. At the general meeting, the decision on who would be part of the delegation was made and the leader of the group was elected. I became the leader of this delegation. We have been guests of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea for 11 days. We stayed at the Koryo Hotel and all the days were, of course, scheduled. On the first day, a meeting was organized by a delegation in Pyongyang with representatives of the Central Committee of the Korean Workers' Party, visit to the homeland of Kim Il-sung, Myeonggan-dae, his home. Of course, how not to visit the National Theater and the famous revolutionary production Flower Girl. There was a meeting with students of Pyongyang University. We visited a maternity hospital, a kindergarten. We saw little Korean pupils who greeted us with unforgettable songs or their smiles and a kind teacher. We visited the circus with changing arenas, a unique factory of the famous Korean embroidery, and of course, those famous embroideries are still kept in our families. On the territory of Pyongyang, of course, we definitely visited monuments and various sculptures. Naturally, we also visited the monument to the Juche idea. Everywhere we went, there was a kind, warm welcome, and at that time, it was very unusual for the Korean population to see such a delegation. We were all women, friendly and kind. In the 90s, meetings were less frequent for obvious reasons, but in the 2000s, our life again intensified. Why? Because Korean residents, builders, railroad workers, and consular representatives could already move freely. They were allowed to live with their families, with children, and children could attend general education Russian schools. Sometimes children of a school age couldn't speak Russian, but Russian children were very friendly and were even the best teachers for children from North Korea, because in such interpersonal communication, two languages are learned very quickly. There were various events in which the citizens of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea who lived in the territory of the Khasan village took part. They certainly took an active part in various rallies, events, concepts, because they sing actually very well. The international project Football Without Borders has become simply unforgettable. The meeting of the two teams from North Korea and Russia showed that friendship always wins. Besides, of course, there were plans. In 2018, the environmental project Trail at the junction of three borders also attracted the attention of school children from different countries. School children presented this project at an international symposium. Well, here we can see that the school children not only attend the lessons of a general education school, but also extracurricular activities. That is, they can study according to their interests. They study at school, as we say, at the junction of three states. On this slide, you can also see here is a student. Our student, she's from Korea, North Korea. Okay, and April 2019 again became unforgettable for the Khasan land and for the entire Russian people, because in April 2019, the schoolgirls of the Khasan school, actually they are my children from the school, from my school, they were again honored to meet this time already the grandson of Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-un. The meeting took place in a very good, friendly, and positive atmosphere. Kim Jong-un really liked the schoolgirls. He thanked them for the meeting, and the schoolgirls were also actually pleased. When some of them gave interviews to journalists later, they said, "Oh, he's quite kind. He smiled so well." And on this slide, you can see after being met in the conference room, the first meeting took place on Russian soil. We see Kim Jong-un sitting in the same chair as his father, Kim Jong-il. These chairs have been preserved to this day. And we hope that friendship will help our countries. In 2020, already in the new House of Friendship, which was rebuilt after 2015, a third new commemorative flag about the visit to Russia by the head of state of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea appeared on the walls of this house. So now on the walls of this house, there are three commemorative flags about visiting by Kim Il-sung, about visiting by Kim Jong-il twice, and visiting by Kim Jong-un. The visit was friendly and, as I said, it took place in a positive atmosphere. And I think that now, of course, a very difficult situation, a pandemic, it fed all of us. But on the other hand, it expanded our capabilities. We can now communicate more online, solve some problems. But one thing we only need to know is that culture, education, and sports, they can really help preserve peace on our entire planet. And we must help this. Thank you very much for your attention during this my speech. Thank you thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Karpova. At the beginning of your speech, you told us the whole world depends on life on the border. Thank you for helping us with your efforts to bring peace on the border. I want to add an apology to those of you who had problems with the translation. I hope you managed to hear the bulk of our last speaker. We're now going to move to our final speaker, who lives in Seoul. Dr. No-hee Park is the senior advisor to UPF in Korea. He has devoted half of his life to promoting Korean cultural heritage and traditional arts with the Little Angels as managing director, guiding more than 50 country tours. He also established an arts education school from elementary school to high school for the Little Angels. Following Dr. Park's speech, we will be showing some historic footage of the accomplishments of the Little Angels. Be sure you don't miss that. But first, more for Dr. Park. Dr. Park has visited Europe and the Middle East on many an occasion. So it is our great pleasure to have him join us for today's webinar. Welcome back to Europe, Dr. Park.
Thank you very much, David. Excellencies, distinguished peace ambassadors, and European leaders, especially respected speakers on this webinar. I'm very pleased to meet you even online today, when people around the world are suffering very much from the COVID-19 pandemic. The topic of this session is about the arts and the cultural initiatives for peace. In half of my life, I was associated with the Korean children's folk dance troupe called the Little Angels, which was founded by Reverend Seung-ho Moon and Dr. Hak-Jan Moon. The Little Angels was founded in 1962 with the founder's unique vision for the realization of world peace through arts and culture. They asked that the Little Angels should serve as a private diplomatic mission through their performances, acting as ambassadors of peace and goodwill, and promoting the Korean people's spirit of peace to the world. In 1961, Dr. No-hee Park, serving as an aide to military attaché at the Korean embassy in Washington, D.C., wrote a desperate letter to Reverend Seung-ho Moon and Dr. Hak-Jan Moon, asking to organize a traditional folk dance company. In his letter, he said, "Today, people around the world only remember Korea as a country destroyed by war. As a diplomat representing Korea, I'm so sad about this situation. The Korean people have deep roots with 5,000 years of history, steeped in beautiful arts, culture, and traditions. If we can show our cultural heritage to the people of the world first, then they will respect Korea and Korean people. Therefore, if possible, I hope entrepreneurs can create a folk dance company and let them perform around the world so they can raise Korea's status and show Korean culture and art to the people around the world." A few A few weeks later, Dr. Bohibak received a letter from Reverend Moon. He approved his idea creating a folk dance company under the condition that the dance company should be a children's folk dance group. Reverend Moon explained the reason in his letter. The children are a symbol of peace. Everywhere in the world, even in communist countries, everyone loves children. Children speak a language of peace that is understood all around the world. Only through the language of children we can make the world know that Korean people is a peace-loving people. So that's why I'm going to name the children's folk dance company as the Little Angels, the Children's Folk Ballet of Korea. After 3 years preparation from 1962, finally the Little Angels started their world tour starting from USA. In 1965, Dr. Park arranged that the Little Angels' first historic American performance was a special performance for former US President Eisenhower. On September 20, the Little Angels visited the residence of President Eisenhower in Gettysburg. Needless to say, the Little Angels from Korea captured President Eisenhower's whole heart. The president said, now the angels in heaven must be in big trouble because these beautiful Korean little angels are dancing on the ground. After a special performance at the National Press Club in 1965, Mrs. David Leroy, the wife of the president of the National Press Club, visited Dr. Bohibak to backstage and said, I kept crying tears of joy while watching the Little Angels. If I had a lot of money, I would use all that money to send the Little Angels around the world 7 times. What is a better way to achieve world peace? These children are apostles of peace and ambassadors of peace and goodwill. If they go around the world 7 times, war will disappear in our world. That was the moment when Reverend Seung-ho and Dr. Khasan Moon's vision for peace was achieved through the Little Angels. In 1970 and 1973, they were invited to give a Christmas performance at the White House. In 1971, the Little Angels was invited for Royal Command performance in attendance of Queen of England at the London Palladium and became Queen Elizabeth's special guest at the reception afterward. And in 1973, the UN General Assembly main conference hall was the site of the Little Angels special concert to raise funds for UNICEF. The Little Angels have been selected to represent the Korean government many times, serving as goodwill ambassadors, introducing Korean art and culture in 40 countries around the world. So far, the Little Angels have performed in more than 60 countries with more than 7,000 stage performances and more than 600 television appearances. I'm sure our co-founders' desire is that the Little Angels continue their tours more and more until world peace is realized. Next year, 2022, the Little Angels will celebrate the 60th anniversary of their founding. Reverend Seung-ho and Dr. Khasan Moon encouraged the Little Angels to organize a special tour in Pyongyang, the capital city of North Korea, in 1991. When Reverend Moon visited North Korea and had a special meeting with President Kim Il-sung, they had already agreed to have arts and cultural exchange program. They hoped that a non-political arts performance by the children, the Little Angels, with a tranquil and clean minds, would lay a cornerstone to open a door for reconciliation and cooperation between North and South Korea, the dearest wishes of Korean people. Finally, on May 3rd, 1998, the Little Angels visited Pyongyang and performed 2 times at Pyongyang Theater. It was very historical that the Little Angels as the first performing arts company from South Korea performed in Pyongyang. The theater was full of enthusiastic audiences. The North Korean audiences who saw the South Korean performing arts program first time were fascinated with the tears and united with the common sentiments of same cultural heritages of 5,000 years history. In return for the Pyongyang performances, the Rangers invited the Pyongyang school children's art troupe to Seoul in May year 2000. Their two performances in Seoul were also fantastic and made great success. At the joint performance of North and South Korean children at the Little Angels Performing Arts Center, one member of the Little Angels said to the audiences, "Tonight, we children from North and South made a complete unity with love without any hatred. These all fathers and mothers here tonight took care of the rest of the procedure to make one Korea afterward." Through this exchange program, the historical first ever North-South Summit talks was reinforced a few weeks later. Teachers will educate and train the Little Angels and direct the world tour have a motto, originally taught by Dr. Park following the speech of the co-founders. If you have a beautiful heart, your dancing will be beautiful. If you have a beautiful heart, your singing will be beautiful. If you have a beautiful heart, your face will also be beautiful. The deep philosophical meaning of this teaching is that all arts are an expression of inner character. Their performance on stage is an expression of the children's inner beauty. So Dr. Park emphasized that they have to be beautiful human beings first. On June 25, 1950, North Korean forces invaded the South and started the Korean War. Thousands of people were sacrificed, and both South and North Korea were devastated. However, in this difficult time, God works to protect our country by sending troops from 16 countries around the world on the name of UN forces to secure the freedom of South Korea. These big troops made great sacrifices and suffered many losses. Perhaps if it wasn't for them, the Republic of Korea today would not be on world map. In addition, 5 other countries supported the war effort with medical supplies and other aids, contributing to the recovery of the country after the war. The Korean people have unlimited gratitude for this country's help. In particular, Reverend Moon had been imprisoned in Hungnam labor camp by communist regime in North Korea when war broke out. In October 1950, the prison was liberated by UN forces, saving his life and securing his freedom. On 60th anniversary of Korean War in 2010, Reverend Moon asked the Little Angels to organize special performance tour to the 21 countries that sent troops and aid to Korea during the war to express our gratitude to the people of those countries. The Little Angels went on 3 world tours to 21 countries in 3 years from 2010, giving performances and holding memorial events for sacrificing war victims and the surviving war veterans on behalf of the Korean people. For this project, a lot of money was needed, but Reverend Sun Myung Moon and Dr. Hak Jan Moon provided great support for this work, which neither the government nor any businessman could do. Such initiatives demonstrate the practice of their philosophy of living for the sake of others. Many veterans expressed their appreciation to Reverend Moon for acknowledging their sacrifice in Korean War after 60 years. They also praised the Little Angels, who expressed their nation's gratitude through their beautiful dancing and singing. In conclusion, the parents founded the Little Angels in order to promote the national prestige through Korean traditional culture and art at a time when Korea was suffering due to the damage of the Korean War. Now they have become ambassadors of peace to the world. These days, the Korean people praise the Little Angels as the origin of the Korean wave that has now made many K-pop groups and other performers popular around the world. I'm proud that Reverend Sun Myung-moon and Dr. Hak Chan-moon will be remembered for their contribution to promote the prestige of Korea and the pride of the Korean people, with a unique vision for the realization of world peace through their arts and cultural initiatives. Thank you very much for your listening. Thank you very much.
David, you are muted. David, you are muted.
My apology. Thank you so much, Dr. Park, for this inspiring presentation and for this great work. Without taking breath, let's watch the video we have prepared. Please understand that much of what we're going to show you now is old footage from the Little Angels' 1998 visit to North Korea. Actually, we do have a lot of newer film, but we wanted you to see this because more than anything else, it captures the role of culture as peacemaker. It speaks to the heart. I hope you will enjoy it.
(2:00, May 2nd, 1998. The Little Angels, the children's folk ballet of Korea, arrived at Pyongyang Airport on Koryo Airlines via a special charter flight. The company included Dr. Po-hee Park, chairman of the Korean Cultural Foundation, the director of the company, 38 dancers, and 28 staff members for a total of 66 people. This, the largest group in the history of North-South civilian exchanges, took a powerful first step towards a new history of unification. At the airport, the Little Angels were warmly embraced by North Korea's Asia-Pacific Peace Committee, which invited the Little Angels, the children's folk ballet of Korea, which is a well-known children's performing troupe throughout the world. They were met by their North Korean counterparts. These children from the North and South took each other's hands like old friends meeting, held each other, and became one without even asking each other's names. They were shy only when holding the hand of someone of the other sex. These children of the North and South sensed they were familiar, of the same blood lineage, and sang together of the joy of their historical meeting. The Little Angels gave 3 performances. The first and second performances were at the Ponghwa Art Theater. Built in the early 1980s, this theater building is both grand and magnificent. The third performance was held in the Monggyeongdae School Children's Palace. This palace is so large and beautiful that it was hard to believe it was a theater for children. After a cute and friendly greeting, the Little Angels' songs and dances unfolded in the north, beginning with the flower crown dance. The young boys and girls danced together with comical expressions. At every gesture, at every moment, the Northern audience blossomed into smiles. The children were enthusiastic and concentrated totally for an excellent performance. Korean traditional dances and songs blend together and flow on. The Korean people of the North could feel anew that all Koreans are one people with roots in a 5,000-year-old culture. The highlight of the Pyongyang performance was the chorus. After singing the song, The Pioneer, as soon as the little angel sang the Northern song, We are happy to meet you, our Northern brethren's hearts opened wide, and performers and the audience became one.
여러분, 저희들과 함께 통일의 노래를 부르실까요?
The chorus reached its peak while singing the unification song together. As they sang with tears, all the participants' hearts were longing for the day of unification. While the North and South sang with one heart, the stage and the audience became a sea of tears. As the nearly 2-hour moving panorama finished with the end of the choir's song, it seemed the theater would rise up from the thunderous applause. Members of the audience came to the stage and gave bouquets to the little angels, embraced them, and shared joy together. With the many barriers separating the two Koreas, we had to return in a roundabout way. The 11-day visit flowed by like a dream. The songs and dances that have lived together for 5,000 years helped soothe the painful wounds and fill the deep ravine of separation. The angels of the North and South helped open the path to unification. The deeper and more sincere pain of parting, the more eager hope of meeting again. The people of the Korean Peninsula now have to run farther with their ancestors of the past and their descendants for the millenniums to come, for the day of unification, where the sun and stars will shine brightly.
Well, does that give you hope? Certainly gives me hope. Please, we don't have time for questions. You've done very well to stay with us all this time, but I want you to join me from your homes as we call up our panelists so that you can see our great speakers, and that all of you, please applaud loudly in your home. Imagine that your football team just scored a goal in the World Cup. Start dancing around your room to thank our great speakers. Thank you to all of our panelists for truly great contributions. Thank you very much. And we come to the end of our session. I would like to thank you all for joining us from our homes. Our next session will be at 10 a.m. Central European Time tomorrow, and we'll focus on young people's contribution to peace. Thank you again for joining us, and goodbye. God be with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
everybody. Thank you.
Yeah. David, you did very good job. Thank you.
Thank you. You
Thank
too.
you.
It's great to see the film.